Chapter 30. Treating of the collision of two worlds and the formulation of a daring plan. The ship slept, or nearly so. Carrie moved quietly along the deserted deck, capturing the stillness in the pre-dawn light. There was poetry in this emptiness, the abandoned deck chairs arranged in perfect rows, the brass railings gleaming faintly, the polished teak still damp with night dew. Each lonely image was a study in anticipation, a frame caught in the liminal space between a journey's end and a new beginning. Each frame she composed was a study in melancholy beauty, a solitary life vest station haloed by amber deck lights, long shadows stretching across empty pathways, the ship's wake illuminated by the vessel's own lights, a glowing path that dissolved into darkness. She worked methodically, moving from shadow to light and back again, filling her memory card with these moments of hushed expectation. Not much to see beyond the ship yet. The sweeping flashes of lighthouses, the land a low dark shape ahead, the sun still a warm glow beneath the ocean behind, lighting up a few clouds with faint pink to set the stage for the drama to come. The Queen Elizabeth was ending her cruise, carrying Carrie and 2,000 other souls home. The sandstone cliffs of the Heads rose in the distance, the imposing silhouettes gradually taking shape as the first rays of sunlight crept above the horizon. Carrie stood at the railing of the upper deck, her body on autopilot, going through the familiar motions of her craft. The ritual was comforting in its predictability, a counterpoint to the chaos of her thoughts. The light was changing quickly, the landscape opening up. Everywhere she looked was a scene to be captured, frozen in time. The pilot boat racing in, wheeling theatrically and nosing alongside for the pilot to transfer aboard with a single efficient step as the two vessels found a moment of harmony. She wasn't the only passenger for long. Gradually, others emerged from their cabins, gathering along the railings to witness the ship's arrival. Their excited murmurs created a backdrop to the steady rhythm of her work, but she barely registered their presence. Her world had narrowed to her viewfinder, to the play of light on water, to the images she was creating. Through her lens, she watched as the cliffs of North Head drew closer, the lighthouse on South Head a cheerful welcome. The ship was moving at a measured pace now, its massive engines throttled back as it prepared to navigate the harbour. Each frame she captured felt like another moment irrevocably lost, another step closer to goodbye.
Quite something, isn't it?
An elderly man beside her peered over the railing.
Been cruising for 40 years, and this is still my favourite part.
Carrie managed a polite smile, not trusting her voice. She stepped back, giving herself space from the rail, from conversation, from anything that might break the fragile composure she had constructed around herself like armour. The light was changing rapidly now as the sun crested the horizon, flooding the scene with a golden brilliance that took her breath away despite everything. The water glittered. The cliffs of the Heads glowed amber against the pale sky. Above it all, the sky had transformed from the soft pastels of early morning to a pale, perfect eggshell blue, so achingly beautiful it seemed almost deliberate in its cruelty. Carrie lifted her camera again, a reflexive action, her photographer's eye unable to resist such perfect light even as her heart ached. The familiar weight in her hands anchored her, kept her from drifting into the dangerous waters of what-ifs and might-have-beens. The Queen Elizabeth passed through Sydney Heads, the massive sandstone cliffs that guarded the entrance to the harbour. To the right lay Manly Cove, its beaches beginning to catch the morning sun. Beyond, the suburb of Balgola Heights rose above the shoreline, its houses perched on the steep hillside overlooking the harbour. Carrie brought her telephoto lens to bear on the northern shoreline, her heart suddenly racing. She had quietly messaged Bronwyn at 4:30 that morning, confirming their expected arrival time, updating the message she'd sent to her mother the previous evening, before seizing the precious moment. The hills of home came into sharper view, and she panned slowly, searching for the familiar outline of her cottage. It sat high on the hillside, its small deck offering an uninterrupted view of the harbour's entrance. There, she found it. The deck was not empty, as she had half feared. dreading the thought of her mother still asleep, missing this moment. Instead, she saw two figures, one seated in a wheelchair, the other standing beside it. Her heart constricted at the sight. Rowena was awake, wrapped in what looked like a heavy blanket despite the warm morning, her silver hair catching the early light. Beside her stood Bronwyn, one hand on the wheelchair, the other raised in an unmistakable wave. Her mother's face came into view, tired but smiling, looking directly at the ship as if she could pick out her daughter from among the many figures lining the decks. And in her lap, Carrie could see the glow of a phone screen. As if on cue, her own phone buzzed in her pocket. She lowered the camera to check the message.
We see you, darling. The ship looks beautiful in the morning light. Welcome home. XX.
The view blurred, and she blinked hard against a sudden burn in her eyes. She raised her free hand in a wave, knowing that from this distance she was one more anonymous figure on the ship's deck, yet feeling the connection across the water as surely as if she could reach out and touch them. She stood for a moment, absorbing the sight of her mother and Bronwyn on the deck, framed by the golden light of dawn, the cottage behind them, the vast expanse of the harbour between. The sight of them on the deck seemed to belong to another life entirely. That was one world, a world of duty and devotion. This ship, Crispin's arms, that was another. How, she wondered, could both of them be hers? And yet, there was a strange comfort in that constancy, in knowing that her place in the world remained secure, even as her heart had been set adrift. Then, abruptly, the view was cut off as the mansion next door slid into frame, its imposing bulk eclipsing her home in an instant. The massive house, all sharp angles and glass and steel, blotted out her small, complicated world as if it had never existed. The sudden loss of sight hit her with unexpected force. Gone. Just like that. Everything about this voyage had been temporary, illusory, a brief escape from reality. And now reality was reasserting itself with brutal efficiency. Yet alongside the pain came a surprising flood of relief. Her mother was there, waiting. Bronwyn was capable and kind. Her real life, with all its complications and responsibilities, had continued in her absence. There was comfort in that continuity, even as she mourned the ending of her brief freedom. As they approached Fort Denison, the small fortress island known locally as Pinchgut, Carrie framed a photograph of the sandstone structure rising from the water. It had once been a place of isolation and punishment, a prison in the middle of the harbour. Now it was a picturesque landmark, its painful history softened by time and tourism. She wondered if all painful things eventually became something else, something less sharp-edged, with enough distance. The warmth came first, a sudden heat against her back that had nothing to do with the rising sun. Then the scent, clean soap and subtle aftershave, achingly familiar. And finally, the pressure of arms sliding around her waist, strong and sure, pulling her gently back against a solid chest. Carrie's hands fell, her camera forgotten, dangling from its strap around her neck. Her breathing simply stopped. She hadn't expected him. Not here, not now. She had left him sleeping, had thought to spare them both the public goodbye.
I couldn't stay away.
Crispin murmured, his breath warm against her ear.
Not for our last hour.
She turned in his arms, her heart hammering against her ribs. He looked so different in the morning light, freshly showered and shaven, his hair still damp at the temples. His eyes were tired, shadowed with the same sleeplessness that she felt in her own bones, but they crinkled at the corners as he smiled down at her. The urge to kiss him was overwhelming, a physical ache that started in her core and radiated upward. She leaned in, her body acting on its own accord, drawn to him as inevitably as the tide to the shore. His hand caught hers, squeezing gently, stopping her before their lips could meet. His eyes flicked meaningfully to the passengers around them, a silent reminder of where they were, of who they were supposed to be. A sudden, stupid heat flooded her cheeks. The rejection was a cold shock against the warmth of moments before. This had nothing to do with the rising sun and everything to do with the crushing remembrance that they were not, in fact, lovers meeting for a romantic sunrise, but two people who must once again become strangers. Oh, of course. The performance begins. Crispin's eyes scanned the crowd, his jaw tightening with obvious frustration. He looked down at her, then deliberately toward a staircase she had noticed but never ascended, the one marked with a discreet sign, "Grills Guests Only." A decision crystallized in his gaze, something defiant and determined.
Not here.
He said, his voice low and urgent.
I can't do this here.
Confused but willing, she followed as he took her hand and led her across the deck, weaving between excited passengers snapping photos with their phones. He led her to the staircase, his stride purposeful. "Crispin, we can't," she began. But he shook his head, glancing around. The early hour and the excitement of arrival had left this section of the ship temporarily unattended. No steward stood guard at the foot of the stairs.
I don't care.
He said, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch.
Not anymore.
He didn't wait for her answer, just started up the stairs, still holding her hand. After a brief hesitation, she followed, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm that was half fear, half thrill against her ribs. At the top of the stairs, before they emerged onto what must be the exclusive grill's terrace, Crispin pulled her into a small alcove, hidden from both the deck below and the terrace above. Before she could speak, his mouth was on hers, hot and insistent. This was no gentle farewell kiss. It was hungry, desperate, acclaiming. His hands framed her face, holding her as if she might disappear at any moment. She responded with equal fervour, her fingers digging into his shoulders, her body arching into his. In this hidden corner, they could be anonymous. A man and a woman stealing a moment of passion. The taste of him was intoxicating. Familiar now, but no less thrilling. She wanted to memorize it, to burn it into her memory so completely that no amount of time could erase it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers.
I've been wanting to do that since I saw you at the railing.
He murmured. She touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw, newly smooth from his morning shave. "You could have stayed in bed," she whispered. "This only makes it harder." His smile was sad but genuine.
I know. But I couldn't bear the thought of you seeing this alone.
He gestured toward the harbour, the city growing closer with each passing minute.
I wanted to see your Sydney through your eyes at least once.
The words struck the careful composure she had maintained all morning, and she felt it shatter. She blinked rapidly, fighting back the tears that threatened. "Then let me show you," she managed, her voice only slightly unsteady. He nodded, taking her hand again, and together, they stepped out onto the grill's terrace. It was immediately obvious why this area was reserved for the ship's most privileged passengers. Spacious and elegantly appointed, it offered unimpeded views of their surroundings from a vantage point higher than the public decks. The morning light flooded the space, highlighting the polished teak and gleaming brass fixtures. A few other passengers were already there, holding thick ceramic mugs, the steam from their coffee misting in the cool morning air as they watched the approach to Sydney with quiet appreciation. Crispin led her to the forward railing, where they had an unobstructed view of the city drawing ever closer. He positioned himself behind her, his arms coming around her waist, his solid warmth against her back, providing an anchor in the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. He was humming, Carrie realized, Moon River. She looked at him, smiling, and joined in. From this elevated perspective, Sydney Harbour unfolded before them like a living map. Carrie composed images through her viewfinder. It was the reverse of the photographs she had taken 5 days ago, standing on the shore, capturing the Queen Elizabeth as she entered the harbour. Now she was on the ship, framing the shore, completing a circle that felt both perfect and painful. The morning had fully broken now, the sun well above the horizon, bathing everything in a clear golden light that brought every detail into sharp relief. The harbour sparkled, the wake of their ship cutting a white path through the blue. The opera house gleamed, its sails impossibly white against the sky. The bridge arched above it all, connecting the two sides of the city in a single, elegant span.
It's beautiful.
Crispin murmured against her hair.
I can see why you love it.
Carrie nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Through her viewfinder, she watched as they passed the entrance to Circular Quay, the ferry terminals busy with early morning commuters. And then, just beyond, she spotted a familiar pathway, the curved railing of Hickson Road Reserve. Her stomach twisted into a tight, anxious knot. That was where she had stood on that first morning, camera in hand, waiting for this very ship to appear. It felt like a lifetime ago. As they drew level with the reserve, she noticed figures standing at the railing, looking up at the massive ship passing so close to shore. Tourists, probably, or locals enjoying the spectacle of the cruise liner's arrival. Without thinking, she raised her hand in a wave and was surprised to see several of the distant figures wave back. Then her eye caught on a particular figure, a woman standing slightly apart from the others. Even from this distance, something about her was familiar. The particular way she stood. The bright splash of colour that could only be... Carrie's breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. And yet... She fumbled for her phone, her hands suddenly clumsy with shock and hope. She pulled up her messages, her fingers flying across the screen. Carrie. Wrong deck. Look higher. She watched the figure below, her heart pounding against her ribs. A moment passed, then another. The woman looked down at her phone, then her head tilted up, scanning the decks of the ship, moving higher, higher, until finally her gaze settled on the grille's terrace. Even across the distance that separated them, Carrie felt the moment their eyes met. She lifted her hand in a small, tentative wave, and the figure below mirrored the gesture immediately. Lucy. Somehow, impossibly, Lucy was there, standing at the exact spot where Carrie had stood 5 days ago. She must have been discharged from the hospital, must have come straight to the harbour, determined to meet the ship in a totally different way from their original plan. Carrie felt Crispin shift behind her, his arms tightening slightly around her waist.
Someone you know?
He asked, his voice warm with curiosity. My friend, she managed, her throat tight with emotion. The one who was supposed to be on the cruise with me. She must have been discharged from the hospital. She watched as Lucy's gaze shifted, taking in not just Carrie but the man standing behind her, his arms wrapped possessively around her waist. Even from this distance, Carrie could imagine the raised eyebrow, the speculative gleam in her friend's eye. Lucy had always been perceptive, quick to pick up on the things Carrie didn't say. A moment later, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. Lucy.
Well, 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 your secret professor, I presume. You have stories to reveal to polite society. Spill immediately, minx.
Carrie closed her eyes for a second, feeling the deck shift beneath her. Lucy. Crispin. Here. Now. The names collided in her head, dizzying, almost sickening in their impossible conjunction. It was like an unplanned double exposure. Lucy on the shore, Crispin at her back. Her two worlds, superimposed and bleeding into one another. And then, in the aftermath of the collision, a clear, sharp idea. She turned to Crispin, her voice suddenly crisp and focused. What time's your flight? He blinked, clearly startled by the abrupt question.
My flight? It's at 3 o'clock from Sydney Airport. Why?
Maybe we can work something out, she said, a plan forming rapidly in her mind. The idea sharpened into focus, a perfect composition appearing in the chaos. This was an opportunity, a fleeting moment of light, and she had to seize it. Crispin's brow furrowed in confusion.
Work something out? Carrie, I don't understand.
She glanced down at her phone, then back up at him, a small, fierce smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Give me a half hour," she said. "I think I've found you a chauffeur." His expression shifted from confusion to stunned surprise, a spark of something like hope lighting his tired eyes. For a suspended moment, she could see the conflict in his face, the struggle between his scheduled, respectable departure and this wild, unplanned alternative.
A chauffeur?
He repeated, his voice uncertain. Carrie nodded, a wild pulse beating at the base of her throat, its rhythm a sudden, desperate hope. It wasn't over. Not yet.